Alright, so here we are in Maya, and we are quickly going to go through the special effects done in Maya. This discussion is not about that, so we'll not go into the depth of how it was done. Very quickly we'll go back to Fusion to finish the composition. Let me bring the elements that we created in Maya. So first of all, the smoke, which was done using 3D fluid container, and you see that it's as you go through here, it's building up here. So there is one smoke element here that you can see right here, and again it's coming from building number 2, and then as you go further there will be another element coming through here. So these two smoke elements were then rendered using the same film chem. Okay, the second part is the DMM part of it, which is digital molecular module, and that's the physics-based simulation, rigid body simulation. So the way I did that is I created a very small polygon cube and applied the same material that is applied on this building here, because this is supposed to be part of that building. And then there is another one which is right here, and sorry, this one is part of this building and this block is part of the other building. These are the rigid bodies under DMM. So if you go to DMM module, basically you just create a polygon and then convert them into a rigid body. And these are active rigid bodies with animation, so they remain passive until the point of impact, and then they become active, because I didn't want these rigid bodies to fall down right from the get-go, because as soon as you make them active rigid body, then they will start to respect gravity and all other forces. So that's that. And then to break them, I created passive rigid bodies, which is these two balls. So what you will see is, as the simulation runs, this will break these buildings or these geometries and will just shatter. So let me just play this, and I haven't cached this, so you have to play this in real time. Just bear with me for a few seconds. Right, so that's first one, and with that you can see that it's actually hitting the other building, and as soon as it hits the other building it's bouncing back. You see some of these chunks are bouncing back. It's still going through the motion because there is too much momentum, and then it will fall down with the gravity. And then soon after that you will see another rigid body here breaking in this part, and that is just like this. Now I would not need the balls, so I would just hide the balls to just show the simulation itself. And the third thing, so the first the cloud, second this DMM objects, and the third is all these image planes breaking down just like that, and they are just particles and instant image planes or polygon planes onto these particles, and they're just falling down. Okay, so that's pretty much all we have in Maya for simulation. And once this was done, then we started rendering them one at a time, and I had some lights here to cast shadow of this thing, so we could have them in Fusion as well. And yeah, so every part was then rendered separately in render layer, and then it was used in Fusion to composite. So let's go over to Fusion again and see where we are. So here we have seen the projection workflow, and we're going to move. Last we're going to see these images that we brought from Maya, but before that there are two other things that I want to, or maybe three other things I want to cover. One is the FBX workflow of Hunter Killer, and that's right here. This is the Hunter Killer that was modeled in Maya. It has shiny material on it. If you come close, you can see that the buildings are reflected in here, and on top there is sky reflected on the top of the machine. Also, if you look at the bottom of the wings, you see building reflections there, and on top you see the sky. And this was done using this one simple image, which is this. So you have seen this bottom image. This is the same one that we have been using, and then on top of that I added some clouds for the top portion. And this image was then applied to the sphere map, which was then applied to this reflection material. And it has fall off and the base color in it, so that's what you see here, and the fall off is what's giving this edge, the reflection. And all that was then applied to this different geometry. So here is the main body that has the same material applied, and that's what you see here, and it's applied to all these different elements. So here are the engines, and the same thing, you see the shiny part of this material, which is showing the reflection of the environment. Yeah, so this node here that collects all these different pieces of FBX is then animated, much like the animation that I had done in my previous comp of showing this aircraft. As you can see here, this is the animation part, and this is the hunter killer that does the damage to the buildings. This is the hunter killer that is just flying around in the beginning part of the shot here. So you can see that it's down and it's going up, and that is through animation of this particular node. As you can see here, the Y offset and all other values are changing. I also needed the engine flames, so I separately rendered engine flames in 3D particles. So if you look at that here are the 3D particles. They're exactly at the same location where the engines are, and because this animation here is instant here, once this was animated I didn't need to do anything here. It automatically followed exact path. Right, so then I have used this merge node here to incorporate also my film cam, because I needed to render this out. So if you look at the area where these 3 particles come together, and I needed this as 2D image sequence so that I can easily do the glow effects and all those things. So that's that. And then you have the normal light wrap that you have seen before. There's nothing special about that. It's just to incorporate the hunter killer itself in a better way, so that you can see the edge work here. So if you go to alpha, you can see that this edge that is taking in the environment, and that environment is blend into this this node here, and then finally you see image itself in the final form. And the edge is also blurred using the blurred edge workflow, which you have seen again also in the other comp. So there's nothing special here about that. The part that I want to talk about is the reflection inside the building. So again, if you look at the comp, the final comp, you see as this let me just look at this way so you can see the full image. As you go from 0 and you see that reflection is happening here, and that is the reflection of the machine and also the particles, and the particles are after the glow and everything applied to that. And the machine is rising, and you can see the reflection is rising, and it's disappearing right after it hits the last row of glass frames here. So that part is pretty interesting. Before I go into that, let me show you something that I saw recently on a YouTube channel. The Foundry has put a discussion about this particular shot, and here you see Iron Man, or Robert Downey Jr., inside the Iron Man suit, and he's looking at all his HUD elements that are around him, and you see in his eyes there are reflections of everything that he's seeing. Now all these elements are CG elements. They're all in 3D environment, and they are computer generated, but his eyes are real and they are showing all these reflections. And the way it was done, if you look at this picture from the Foundry channel, and this is the new composition, there's a 2D image sequence of Robert Downey Jr., and using some 3D software the artist created these eyeballs, And if you look at inside the eyeballs, there are tiny cameras, and these cameras are capturing everything that is happening outside, which is all these things that you see. And these are all created in or composited in 3D environment of Nuke. And because this camera is capturing everything in here, it would be sort of like, what the eyeball would see. And then the artist turned around and used this image that camera was receiving as the rendered image and projected that onto the eyeballs. So then you have reflection, so to speak, or the image of what you see out here onto the eyeballs, and then when you combine eyeballs to the Robert Downey Jr.'s image, you get this sort of effect. So this is exactly the same thing I have done here. If you look at this 3D node, what you see here is the rising machine, which is at 0, 0, 0. It's at the bottom and it's going up, and it's rising in front of the building. So imagine that there's a building here, and inside the building I have kept this camera which is capturing everything that's happening. So now from the camera perspective, you're inside the building. So let's see if we can change this camera to this one. Now we are seeing everything from that building. If you were in the building, this is what you would have seen. And if I render that, this is what the render would look like. So immediately after I render that, I want to apply this to and obviously I want to combine with my flames, because also need the flames with the machine, and the flames are combined using the same camera here. So this camera here, which is same as this, is going into this node here where the particles are coming, and then particles are then rendered down the stream, which is going to be used somewhere else. But from this there was another render created which is using this camera. And so if you look at this render node and look at the the control, it's the same camera as this camera here, and then it was blurred and then glow applied to it and then combined to the hunter killer. So this is what you would have seen from inside the building. So if I use this image, sort of like the image that this eyeballs would have seen, and turn it around and project it, so here is the projector, onto an image plane, right? So if you go to this node here, this is the another 3D node, and look at this image plane here, then you would see exactly what artist did here, which is reflected this image onto the eyeball. Instead, I'm reflecting this image onto an image plane which is right at the location where the glass windows are. So I got halfway there by doing this, meaning that now I can see on that, in that 3D environment, on the glass panel, I can see this image rising. Now that is fine, but if I just use that using my film cam, because ultimately I have to render this this film cam out, and if I render it here, which is instance film cam, this is what it would look like, which is fine, nothing wrong with this. If I'm compositing this with my rest of the scene, this is exactly what would rise inside the building, and that's okay. So if I just go to the last image here and let's see what it would look like, this is what it would look like. So let me go to frame number 40, and you see the image is right here, exactly where it should be. The only problem is that you can see this image through all this concrete as well. So it looks like that somebody is actually projecting this image onto the building from outside, which technically that's what we are doing. But then it doesn't work, because the image is supposed to be inside the building, not outside, and all this concrete and the rail for windows should be outside. So for that, what I did is I created a mask, and the way I did that is if you look at this image here, which is the same building that you have seen before, except I have erased everything outside, and I have also erased everything inside the windows. Only kept the parts where I didn't want the reflection to take place. Then I used the bitmap to create a mask, applied this mask to a projector, and then projected this mask through this projector onto a geometry here, and this geometry is exactly at the same place where the geometry that is capturing this image, right? So then if I look at this 3D node, what I see is just the image of the mask. Now I render it using my film cam, because ultimately it has to be, this is how the shot is going to move. But the advantage is that now this image plane is locked exactly where the building is and exactly where my other image is coming, because this one is also rendered using the same camera as this one here. It's the same camera that pipes down and pipes across into this two 3D merge node. So the render of this one, which is this, was then created into a mask using bitmap, and this mask was then applied onto the image as effect mask. So now when you look at this, you see all the squares and everything ahead of it. So now the image is chopped based on the opacity of this mask, and that when you composite with this final node here, now you can see that image is behind this this building. So just keep an eye on that image as I disable this particular node here. See what happens to this image. It's outside, inside, again outside, inside. So that's how I achieved the reflection, which again same way as so to speak how it was done in Iron Man. So the point being that in Fusion you can also achieve the same thing very quickly, and it would be perfectly accurate because you are actually following the object and everything in the 3D space. So the reflection itself, although it is fabricated reflection using the camera technique, it's still accurate, meaning that if my hunter killer makes a turn, then you would also see it making a turn inside the building. And that's the reason why you see as the hunter killer is rising, if you look at the way it rises, it's actually making a turn this way, right, pointing this way, and that's exactly how it comes across. It's pointing this way. So that's that. And the other elements I have here are 2D particles in Fusion, and these are the particles for the far end. So this smoke here is created using this sequence of nodes, and this flame and this smoke here created these two sequences. They all come together in here, and then they merge with the final scene. The only thing I would say about this workflow is these are actually 2D particles. So if you look at this one particle here, it's just 2D particles going up. It has some randomness by turbulence and some directional force applied to that, and then it was rendered. But the speed of this smoke was just way too fast, so then I used the time stretcher to slow it down. Then I blurred the same. There you go, I blurred, and then I applied that onto an image plane which you wouldn't be able to see because the background is black and the smoke is black itself. So so you wouldn't be able to see what's happening here. You may be able to see here. Let's see. Yeah, so here you can see the flame. So this is sort of the 2D image sequence. It's in 3D space, so it doesn't have to move with with the camera. So I didn't need to render it using my film cam. All I did is just combine into the main scene here, which is the 3D environment, and that has everything. It has this smoke here and the smoke in the back here, the streak that you see here. And finally, these are the images that we brought from Maya, and you have all these clouds and those kind of elements. So we need to actually move into this right area of the time frame. So you have that, and then you have shadow also, which was separately rendered in Maya. Then I used this same cloud as this and created a mask out of that using bitmap, and used that to blur the shadow. Now this is too much blur, I think, but when you use that blur, it only is blurring the shadow and not the actual cloud that is also in here. But that's because the blur is masked by the cloud. So that's that, and then here is the DMM, all the debris that are flying around. So that's building number 2, and then here is building number 1. Exactly the same thing happening there with all the elements coming together. Then I had one additional explosion that I brought in from combustion, and I just rendered in combustion a few frames. I think let's see how many frames I rendered. 150 frames, and this 151 frames were then applied into this comp starting at frame number 210, and that was just sufficient to take it. So that's that. So the heat haze that I had talked about earlier, if you look at this render here, which is the render of this 3D particles, and it's the same as this in the final comp. These 3D particles were then blurred, and as it's going down into the comp, there is another mask used here as the bitmap, and this bitmap was applied with this softer edge. So you can see this one here, because I wanted this heat to be around it, not too close to it, but around it. So this one gives me that area where I would see the heat haze. Then this mask, so to speak, was then applied onto the fast noise. So this one is just a fast noise. If I disable this node here, then you will be able to see the fast noise in the entire screen. But I didn't need the entire screen filled with fast noise. I only needed the areas where the masking would be. So here are the impacted fast noise, and the fast noise has some animation going on, just random pattern of motion. And this was then applied to this displacement node, and this displacement is of the building that's coming. So here is the building itself. Right, so if we play this, you see that there's a displacement going on here, which is not in this video. So that's exactly what we just did. We created displacement off of this fast noise in here, but then this fast noise is blocked. And that's the reason why you see only this part is displaced according to this masking. Right, so that's pretty much all that I wanted to talk about in this comp. I hope this was useful. I'm sure that we'll have something more going on. I have a couple of projects currently in the pipeline that I will bring out in the next few weeks. That's going to be second part of this tutorial here, where there is a lot of destruction of the street, and some underground machines are breaking the road, and they are coming out like you would see in a transformer type scenario. Okay, so at the end I'm going to play this clip for a few seconds, and we'll talk again, I'm sure. Until then, happy summer.